housing legislation. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. We are excited to provide an overview of the new housing legislation and the budget enhancement that Governor Kelly so graciously provided and the legislature passed with overwhelming bipartisan support this year. We're excited to hear today from KHRC and Ryan Vincent, their executive director, Rachel Willis, our legislative liaison with Kansas Department of Commerce, and Randy Speaker, who is our housing specialist for Kansas Department of Commerce. So today, Rachel, who's going to tell us more about Governor Kelly's budget enhancement that she presented to the Kansas legislature this year. Thank you for joining us, Rachel.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me. All right. So first, I just wanted to go ahead and give an overview of the budget enhancements. And yes, we're very excited about those enhancements and the opportunities that they will create across our state. So we can go to the second slide. Here, Trisha. Perfect. So as we think about FY 2022, we've got a $20 million allocation for the moderate income housing program from the State General Fund. Then as we move on to FY 23, we will see another $20 million allocation from the ARPA fundings, so the American Rescue Plan Act. Trisha, if you want to go back just to that second slide. And then additionally in FY 23, of course, you'll still see the normal allocation for that particular program, which is $2 million. And this does come from the state general funds. So then the last budget enhancement that we saw for housing or related to housing is for the Rural Housing Revolving Loan Program, or that trust fund. And this is for FY 23, and it does come from that state general funds. So Ryan, did you want to elaborate a little bit more on this funding?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, and a special thanks to Trisha and Rachel and Randy and all the good friends at the Department of Commerce, Office of Rural Prosperity. Maybe just a quick high-level overview. My name is Ryan Vincent. I'm Executive Director at Kansas Housing. We've been around for almost 20 years and have worked very closely with the Department of Commerce and ORP, going clear back to the beginning of the Kelly administration when the Office of Rural Prosperity was doing listening tours around the state. We've heard voices from rural communities and urban areas alike just about the needs for housing and for homes in our state. Through these listening tours, there was a great momentum and discussion that got going that eventually led to a statewide housing study, the first study in 30 years for our state. Special thanks to the then Lieutenant Governor Lynn Rogers, and then under the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Toland as well, for getting the statewide housing study finished and released along with our office. And that led to some significant legislative success. And I'll tell you, it was truly bipartisan, as Rachel and Trisha noted. It was the chambers of commerce, the community leaders, the League of Counties and of Cities. It was Farm Bureau and rural electric groups and nonprofit and housing advocates. And they clearly talked about the need for affordable, safe homes in our state and the ties to economic development. That led to the success, historic success that Rachel just kind of walked us through. Just to put it in perspective, KHRC generally gets about $2 million a year for that one moderate income housing program. To take it to $62 million for actual housing development is huge. It's monumental, it's historic. We're going to be able to actually address our underlying housing problems in rural communities, which is a first. So we're excited about it. I know our partners at ORP and Commerce are excited about it. As far as the plans at this point, what we've done at our office is we've been doing a public input tour to kick things off. We've had regional meetings in Mineola and in Stockton, in Holton, and in Coffeyville. We've had webinars in partnership with the Kansas Association of Counties and the League of Municipalities. Yesterday, we had a webinar that Randy and Trisha both spoke at that was with our developer network. Obviously, an important voice to make sure that we've got the entire developer, contractor, builder network ready to build. Tomorrow, we have a statewide webinar that already has nearly 300 people registered. I'll be posting a link to that shortly so that people can sign up if they're interested in learning more about our plan for these funds, as well as some of the other programs you're going to be hearing about. That webinar is tomorrow at 11 a.m., which I realize is short notice. We've been trying to get the word out as much as possible. But as far as our plan for these funds, historically, we do one request for proposal once a year in July, but that was for $2 million, which always went fast and didn't go all that far when you're covering the whole state. Our plan now is to start doing 3 rounds per year. So every 4 months, we'll roll out a new request for proposal. That will include not only the expanded moderate income funds, which we intend to be doing larger grants and more of them with the additional resources, but we're also going to be able to start adding in some of the tax credits that you'll be hearing about here shortly. So that's our general plan. We're kind of viewing it like the snowball effect, that we'll start off with a $5 million RFP in July. And then we'll continue to add to those resources. And I think the best part of that is recognizing that sometimes development takes time. It takes time for cities and counties to ramp up their capacity, for their network of partners in development to ramp up theirs. It's going to allow us to have conversations if an application isn't successful, and then we will be able to actually work with the applicant to tweak that application and reapply. They don't have to wait a year. It'll just be 4 months. So that's our general plan. We are excited to have some of these more different pots of funds that will be able to address specific communities' needs, because those needs are so different, whether it's a rural area in the Southwest that's building new dairies, whether it's something in the Southeast part of our state that has been still recovering from the devastating flooding from a decade ago. So we're here to work with your communities to get those resources out the door. So happy to chime in on the additional slides later, but I'll turn it back to you, Rachel. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that overview and kind of the historical information, and then talking about where we're going and this exciting future here. So like we mentioned before, when the legislature came back for veto session, they worked what we're calling a mega housing bill, right? So there was a conference committee formed from the Senate Fed and State Affairs Committee, and then on the House side, it was the Financial Institutes and Rural Development. And they put together, they took a bill, a House Bill 2237, and deleted its original contents and added these 6 housing bills that had been worked in different forms and fashion throughout the session to create this one mega housing bill. So just going to quickly go over these, and then I'll turn it back over to the other panelists to really dive into what it means around policy and implementation as we move forward. So the first one is HB 2701. So this expands the RHID to those economically distressed urban areas, and it specifically includes Topeka. This has been administered in the past by Commerce and will continue to be as we move forward. Then we have Senate Bill 375, which is the Housing Investor Tax Credit Act. This has a $13 million cap. It's transferable tax credits for housing investors and partners. And specifically, our slide's lost. Oh, we'll keep going and she'll catch up, I'm sure. So specifically within that 375, that component, it really focuses on communities or areas that have housing shortages due to those new economic developments, right? Or those business expansions in that particular community. So there is that connection there to economic development or business expansion as we think about the components of 375. So then the third bill put into this mega housing bill was Senate Bill 369, which is the Affordable Housing Tax Credit. And this just matches those federal low-income housing tax credits with state tax credits. So if you're familiar with those federal ones, if you're eligible for those federal ones, then you can apply and receive those state ones or at a state level now. House Bill 2268 was also included in the mega bill, which is the Rural Home Loan Guarantee Act. This guarantees loans, of course, made by banks or financial institutes for the construction or renovation of single-family homes in a rural community. So specifically in communities with 10,000 or less in population. House Bill 2236, it authorizes appraisers to exclude sales approach for very rural areas. So again, it's that 10,000 or less in population, and we'll talk more specifically about that later. And then House Bill 2569 is the Historic Kansas Act, and this really adds 2 more tax credits to those historic tax credit program that already exists. So that's, like I said, just a quick overview of the mega housing bill. And I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Randy now to talk about the expansions to RHID and what that means at a policy and implementation process.
Rachel, as kind of an overview of the RHID, or Rural Housing Incentive District program, originally it was for subdivision development and similar to a TIF in that you could capture the incremental tax from the original valuation and the project was developed. And for the Rural Housing Incentive District, that is 25 years of capture time that is available. And the unique aspect about it is that you can only do non-vertical construction. Now, the Senate Bill 90 expanded that and set it up for downtown business areas and for the development of lofts and residential on the upper floors in downtown businesses. Still retained the 60,000 population per city and 80 per county. And because then it allowed for the development and to reimburse for the expenses of the residential portion of the building. Expanded to the city of Topeka is eligible now, and also any other of the areas which are economically distressed, urban areas. And we think that that probably will be qualified census tracts, but we're still in the process of verifying that. So, so anyway, that's the review of it. And it's a program. I think we have over 40 communities now that are participating in the Rural Housing Incentive District, and we're looking forward for more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy. I appreciate that. It's a great program. The next program is the Housing Investor Tax Credit Act. Sorry, no, this is still Randy's piece. I think this is still. Yeah, there we go. There we go. The next one is the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act.
Did you want me to take that, Trisha?
Sure, if you'd like to, or I can cover it.
Stand for questions.
Okay. This one is, it basically is an excellent match for the LIHTC program, which is low income housing tax credits. And I'm sure Ryan can really speak to this. It is an excellent program that's currently utilizing federal funding to create tax credits for qualified developments across the state of Kansas. This program would provide a match to that federal tax credit to create more opportunities for low-income housing development across our state. The cool thing about this legislation is that it does allow them to pass this credit along to their partners or members of their LLC or their corporation. However, but the units that are built with this funding must remain as low-income housing for no less than 15 years. So it can be rentals or they can sell the homes, but they have to maintain that low income status for 15 years. Tax credits can then be carried forward as a credit for 11 years following the first year of the project. So they don't have to use all the tax credits in the first year. Ryan, did you want to add anything to this?
I'd be happy to, Trisha, and that's a great overview. You know, this program has been in existence for 30 years now. It started under President Reagan with the bipartisan support of Congress. And it is a wonderful example of a public-private partnership to address our country's housing needs. The program historically will get $3 to $5 in requests for every dollar of tax credit that we're able to award. So the challenge is there's simply not enough resource. The other challenge is that it is limited to low-income housing development. And there's a huge need for that, and we recognize the importance of it, and we're pleased to administer that resource efficiently and effectively on behalf of the state. What we're excited about for both of these new tax credits, I'll start with the affordable housing tax credit, is that this dollar for dollar state tax credit will allow us to almost do 2/3 more production per year, which means we'll be able to take it from annual awards of maybe 10 to 12 developments, multifamily developments around the state, to maybe 20, maybe 22. That's huge. That's a monumental increase in the amount of production that we're able to do through the program. This program can serve senior housing, it can serve special needs housing. We're able to build family developments. Some of the only new housing being built, particularly in rural communities around the state, have been financed through this tax credit program. So we're excited about that opportunity. I might add the dollar for dollar match is also available on the 4% credits, which are coupled with private activity bonds that are allocated through the Department of Commerce. We're excited about that because historically, we haven't been able to use all of the bond cap that the state gets every year. So that's an untapped resource the state of Kansas has been returning to the federal government year after year after year. We're just projecting at this point that we could almost double the amount of 4% tax credits that we're awarding with the state credit. This will obviously double the amount of bonds that are issued as well for multifamily housing development around the state, which will be huge for urban areas. It'll be huge for more smaller cities. But it'll also be huge in making sure that we're leveraging all of the available dollars for the state of Kansas that Congress has made available to us. However, I did mention that the biggest challenge with this program is that it can only serve up to 60% of area median income. What we're pleased about is that this housing investor credit that was the previous slide that passed out of the same bill will be a new $13 million annual credit that KHRC will again have as a tool. It's a tool that we'll be able to couple maybe with some of our moderate income housing funds. So our plan at this point is this summer to go through the normal qualified allocation process, which is the governing plan for our housing tax credit program. We're going to be putting in proposed plans for both the affordable housing tax credit as well as the housing investor credit. We'll be then rolling out those credits here in our second RFP and then our subsequent ones after that. As I mentioned, we had a webinar yesterday with housing developers. We met with the Department of Revenue the other day to make sure that we're working through the back end logistics and processes. Here in just a few minutes, I'm actually going to be meeting with a panel of state tax credit investors and developers and syndicators, so that we're making sure that we're learning about and developing a program that's going to meet all needs of our constituents, whether it's developers, whether it's communities, whether it's tenants, or whether it's the taxpayer. So we're excited about this new resource and look forward to rolling it out along with all of the other new tools we'll be talking about. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. And I think one of the cool things, and I realized we skipped this slide, Ryan, I think this one's one of the ones I'm most excited about that's coming to KHRC is this Housing Investor Tax Credit Act. This program would facilitate investment in suitable housing that supports the growth of communities. And this really surrounds economic development projects, announcements that are happening with existing business expansions or new companies coming to Kansas or especially our rural communities. So this will provide housing investors. There's $35,000 for cities with populations of 8,000 or less, $32,000 for populations of 8,000 to 25,000, and then $30,000 per residential unit for these qualified housing projects for populations less than 75,000. So it's new housing, including single family, manufactured housing, modular housing, and even multifamily residential dwellings. So that's huge. Whereas some of these different types of categories weren't eligible before, this program would allow for that. And it really captures that need for investors and those folks who are looking to invest in housing for their communities, that I think is really helpful. The other cool thing that this policy has is that it really makes sure that communities less than 8,000 have a guaranteed pot of funding of $2.5 million. Then populations of less than 25,000, another $2.5 million. And then populations from 25 to 75 get $8 million. So these are guaranteed allocations of these tax credits to really help make sure that investors in those towns get priority funding for these initiatives, especially around those economic development projects.
Trisha, if you don't mind, I may just add, what you're bringing up about the ties between economic and development and housing, of course, are huge, and it's been a huge recurring theme during the legislative session. I should note that we always have worked closely with the Department of Commerce, but that relationship we continue to build on. So our offices right now are already doing joint webinars to our developers to share where the Department of Commerce is making economic development investment and our office is making housing investment. We're also now sharing information when KHRC receives moderate income housing applications to find out from the Department of Commerce what kind of information the department keeps on job growth or opportunities. So definitely want to highlight to all of the attendees on this webinar just that beneficial relationship that we have with Commerce that we truly value at KHRC. It's important that everyone is working and firing on all cylinders to really meet both our economic development and our housing needs in the state. So I appreciate that chance to chime in on that.
Yeah, of course. And one of the questions that someone had was, does this have to go right along with an economic development project to take advantage of this? And not necessarily. Those projects that are tied directly to economic development. From what I understand, Ryan, and this is your program and how you guys are administering it, but those are given priority over projects that are just standalone housing projects. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we've always had an evaluation criteria that are listed in our request for proposal. And some of those are things like community need and leverage and readiness to proceed. And of course, all of those kind of factor into job growth and economic development initiatives going on in the local community. So it's always kind of been behind the scenes in the evaluation itself. Now that we're going though from a $2 million program to tens of millions of dollars, we're going to try to flesh that out in the RFP that we'll be issuing in this summer to make sure that we're really prioritizing some of those economic development and jobs that I think were behind the legislative intent of these new resources.
And Ryan, we have a couple questions in the chat that I think would be good for you to help answer. Can they combine this tax credit program with like moderate income housing? Can they do both of these projects together or use both of these programs together? That's
a great question. And our intent, and want to make sure I'm being clear. So there's the housing investor credit, which is the one that's intended to be serve more moderate income housing needs. We would like to see that coupled with some of the MIH applications. We think it's important to make sure that we're leveraging all available resources and tools. And what's beautiful about all these programs is it really leaves some of the local communities and applicants to be able to develop. They identify what their needs are and come to us with the request rather than vice versa. So we definitely would encourage people to be creative, to use these new resources coupled together. And that's not just limited to these two resources, whether it's RHID, whether it's some local bond authority, or whether it's just community foundation dollars or dollars from employers. We'd love to see public-private partnerships. We'd love to see regional applications because it takes all stakeholders to be a part to the solution to make these things a success. Awesome. And then one more question on this specific slide. Can the housing investor tax credit be used to rehab a downtown building into an apartment building? And I think this could be kind of cool. You can combine the programs with this one too to do that work. Yeah, so I think that would be eligible. And of course, we'd have to do the underwriting and really think about what ultimately makes its way into the request for proposal to make the award for these credits as well as the grant funds. But I think that's a nice model. And we've seen real successes, whether it's in Alma, whether it's in Atchison with some of that upper story renovation of these beautiful historic properties. And I think it's a perfect fit with maybe the upper story program that goes through our HID as well.
That's what I was thinking too. It would work really well with our HID as well. So let me move on to the next program here, which Ryan also will administer. And I think, Ryan, this is your last one because I know you got to hop off here in a second, but this is the Rural Home Loan Guarantee Act. This program will help guarantee loans made by banks or other financial institutions for the construction or renovation of a single family home in a rural county. So we've seen this across the state, and Ryan, I'm sure you have as well, where a community helps get a development going, they build it. It costs, we'll use $150,000 for an example to build those homes, but then they don't appraise out or they don't sell for the cost that it was to build it. So this program would help keep those projects whole and kind of provide a guarantee to those rural communities who are looking to grow housing in their communities. But it is for only counties with population of less than 10,000. And there's only $2 million that'll go towards this project. So we're hoping this will expand in future years. But it really is for the amount of the loan that exceeds 80% of the appraised value of the home. And it's limited to $100,000 per unit. So Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about that too before you hop off?
I'd be delighted to, Trisha. It's, we're really excited about this program. As you mentioned, it's only $2 million, but we're kind of viewing it as a pilot program that we think that if we can show a need for it, which we've certainly evidenced in our statewide housing needs assessment, but also that we've rolled it out thoughtfully and deliberatively, that we can go back to the legislature and show the need for it and the success of the program. As you mentioned, there's really a barrier to the market working right now, particularly in rural areas with this issue. If the cost to build a home is immediately higher than the ultimate appraisal value of the home, then lenders aren't going to be able to loan because they don't have a security interest that's going to cover the amount of their loan. That's a barrier to loans and financing, which is ultimately a barrier to housing being built in our smallest and really all of our rural communities. So this new guarantee program, which KHRC will be administering, is an ability to help move the market to a place where it can effectively work. So our steps now with this are we've been sharing this new program in all of these meetings and webinars that I've been talking about. But this is a little bit outside of our normal area. We do have a first-time homebuyer program that's been around in existence for a number of years to provide down payment assistance. But we want to make sure we're being thoughtful in how we develop this program. So we're creating an ad hoc work group that's going to involve a number of different offices. And I know I reached out to your office as well, Trisha, to maybe be a part of that work group. We've got the Kansas Bankers Association, Federal Home Loan Bank of Topeka. We've got rural housing, USDA Rural Development, the State Treasurer's Office, a number of great partners out there that would be bring real expertise to financing, mortgage origination and underwriting and compliance, as well as guarantee programs themselves. We want to make sure we're being good stewards of government funds, but we're also just helping meet this need for local communities to make sure that we can start having some loans being made and housing being built. And what I'm really excited about is I think one of the big issues is with the appraisals is there's no comparables. There's no new housing being built in a lot of these small rural communities. So if we can finance and guarantee just a couple of these homes in some of these communities, then there will be comparables down the road for appraisals to be able to really effectively capture what the market is today. That will help the real estate market and the lending market better function. So we're excited about this as a pilot program and are looking forward to reporting the successes to the legislature and to our stakeholders in the coming months and years.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And I think Randy Speaker is going to be joining you on that team. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this. It's a huge thing that I was really excited to see that rural development at Financial Institutions and Rural Development Committee create and push through. It'll be a game changer, I think.
Absolutely.
So next up, we'll have a discussion on the appraiser sale approach. And Rachel's going to tell us a little bit about this one.
So kind of building off of what Ryan was talking about. So this component of the mega housing bill is the appraiser sales approach exclusion. And so what this does is it allows appraisers to exclude those comparisons in rural county mortgage financing appraisals if the property is unique or there's the lack of those comparables within 30 miles. So this will only apply to those counties that have populations of less than 10,000. And so if this does apply, that appraiser will have to file a report that really documents their efforts to gather comparables, and there was, just a lack of comparables or that market data. The only way that this exclusion could not be used is if the mortgage cannot be sold in that secondary market or guaranteed. Then you're going to have to, the appraiser will have to use the normal approach when conducting business in that particular situation. So again, we feel like this is really going to help a need that has been expressed, and we're excited to see such bipartisan support and a great collaboration across stakeholders to get this component included in that mega housing bill. So.
Thank you, Rachel. I know we've certainly experienced it in the county that I live in. It's a pretty big deal for our appraisers, so I'm excited to see that happen. The next one is one of the ones that I'm really excited about, and we provided testimony for in the Rural Development Committee in the House. This bill would amend the historic preservation tax credit by adding 2 different tax credits that have to go through a rehab plan and be a qualified taxpayer as long as they spend $5,000 or more on a structure. The first program is a 30% of qualified expenditures for the restoration and preservation of a qualified historic structure with a population between 9,500 and 50,000. The next tier is 40% for populations less than 9,500. And this, just for perspective, the current program is only a 25% historic tax credit. And this is for residential or commercial for this portion of this program. They have to spend at least $5,000 or more to get this historic tax credit. But if the building is on the state registry, if the building is in a historic district, if you're on the national registry, this piece of this tax credit bill will apply to you. The cool part is that there's a second piece that is basically the 50-year-old building rule. Building owners can get a tax credit against their tax liability of 10% of the costs and expenses for that restoration of a commercial structure. So it's just commercial for this piece. But the building doesn't have to necessarily be in a historic district or be registered with the State Historic Preservation Office or the federal office. It just has to be at least 50 years old. So this really will tackle some of our downtown buildings and our small communities that maybe don't have any buildings left. I'm thinking about Burden, Kansas, when there's maybe one building left in their downtown, but that building is certainly historic and has an amazing story with it. So these are the types of programs that can help restore our downtowns across the state of Kansas. This tax credit will be limited to $10 million annually statewide, so apply soon. And then an additional tax credit of costs and expenses are going to be allowed also for the fire suppression materials or equipment. So if you find out that you're going to have a tenant on that second floor and you have a business on the first floor and you need to get that building sprinkled, this will help provide a tax credit to cover that cost. This also incentivizes those businesses or the banks, the savings and loan associations, those businesses that are going to support the lending on these projects. They only have to pay taxes on 50% of the interest earned on these loans to taxpayers. So that really supports those bankers in helping lend to support the renovation of these downtown buildings. I'm excited about this when it really tags on to our HEAL project that we rolled out this last year, and hopefully we'll do again this year. And this, I think that if you start stacking some of these programs we've been talking about, you can make a big difference for your downtown buildings, for your homes across Kansas. And so we're excited to see all of these new pieces of legislation that have moved forward. Before I move on, I'm going to check with the chat, see if we have more questions. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to answer a couple of these questions before we move on to the last slide. Will the local government still be the applicant for the investor credit, or can the investor directly apply directly? Almost all these programs are going to want to have some local government or your economic development, your housing authority participation on some of these projects, but the investors can apply directly for these tax credits. So I wanted to make sure we answered that question right quick. The next slide will help answer one of the questions we have in the Q&A. And we're going to have Randy Speaker really cover this last slide. And this really talks about the additional housing resources we have at Kansas, but Randy has really led the charge in creating some new tools. Randy, I hope you can kind of talk a little bit about the Shovel program, and then as well as the developer database that will be on our Kansas Department of Commerce website here that we have shared.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Trisha. The Housing Opportunity Venture Loan, with the acronym. It is a development loan program targeted at cities under 10,000. No, it will be repaid 30 days after the permanent financing is in place, and we will loan $5,000 per project with a 20% match. For some reason the project doesn't go through, then the loan is forgivable. Some participation, and you can find that on the website that's on the screen there. Getting some of those applications going. Second item, developer profile. One of the things in the development world is that knowledge is power. And about things is the first big step. What we've done is developers to give us kind of what their preferences are, where they prefer to develop, what types of projects they've done in the past, what they can do to help communities, and profiles are in a database. And in the next Southeast Kansas, and you're interested in senior housing, you can query that and come up with the different developers who would be interested in coming to Southeast Kansas and have some experience in senior housing. So we're hoping that this will be a way to bring great minds together and to increase the production of housing in the state. So it's on our website. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. And the audio is cutting out, so really quickly, I'll highlight a little bit of what he was talking about. There's two programs, Shovel, which is a pre-development fund. This fund really helps cover, and now of course my internet connection's unstable. There must be a solar flare or something, right? So this fund will help cover those pre-development costs, the soil borings, the environmental, the architecture studies that need to be done in order to get a project up and running, get the financing, and get the whole thing put together. It can be forgivable if the project never comes about, so that's good to hear. But it's a 0% interest loan that is paid back once the full project gets moving forward and the full financing is put together as a package. So that's project one that he mentioned. And then the second one is the developer's profile. And this is one of the questions that we had in our Q&A. This will be a developer database that we have, that will be on this page here that we have listed, the kansascommerce.gov/housing. This will provide a searchable database that someone can look up any developer that is interested in the type of housing that they're looking for in their community. So Randy was talking about, if someone only wants to focus on senior housing, you can look for senior housing and find a developer that's what they want to do. If they want to focus on low income housing and they're experts at using the LIHTC program, you can look that up as well and find this database. Right now, we are currently developing it, rolling it out soon. But you can reach out to myself or to Randy to get that information right now as we're fine-tuning the IT pieces of that searchable database. But that database does live right now at Kansas Department of Commerce if you're interested in getting one of these projects moving forward with all these new programs. All right, I think that we've covered all of our slides now today. We'll open it up if anyone has any additional questions. Here are, the information is all myself, but we have sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened to our signal there, but let me know. Does anyone have any questions? We can kind of talk through some of these slides if anyone has any additional questions. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. These slides, as well as this video, will be posted on Commerce's website at the Office of Rural Prosperity, and we'll also post it on this housing page as well. Please let us know if you need more information, and we'll make sure that we share these slides with everyone who registered for this webinar as well. I'll send out these slides as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to see so many people participate on this project. Oh, one more question. Do you have a timeline on MIH apps? Yes, they're going to be doing this every 4 months. I believe the first application is going to be this summer. And so I think they're talking about July, and then they're going to roll out another one at the end of September, which will be October deadline. So we're excited to see so many dollars coming to support moderate income housing, to support low income housing, to support market rate housing, and of course, support downtown reinvestment in Kansas communities. So thank you all so much. I appreciate all of you for joining us today, especially for such short notice. If you need more information, please go take a look at that link in the chat from Ryan that he posted. They're going to do a more detailed webinar tomorrow to talk about what KHRC is doing with these funding opportunities. So thank you so much. Feel free to join KHRC tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing new housing pop up all across Kansas next year. Thank you.